Hello, today we're going to be talking about the biological macromolecules. The four that we're going to be talking about are the carbohydrates, the lipids, the proteins, and the nucleic acids. So first we're going to talk about a little bit of background about carbon. Carbon is the backbone of life and can form 4 covalent bonds. It can also form a variety of different structures, including rings and also linear chains. It is polar and non-polar bonds that it can form as well. If it's organic, it means that a compound consists mostly of carbon and hydrogen. Very, very important is that keyword mostly. Okay, these and many other elements are present in non-living things as well, just at different proportions. Now, if we say it's a hydrocarbon, it consists of only carbon and hydrogen and is a non-polar. Okay, so the key there is the only or the mostly words. So if it's a hydrocarbon, this is what it's going to look like in shorthand. Okay, so at every single one of these points, you're actually going to be seeing, or you can visualize that there's a carbon. So carbon here, 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 here. So I'll go ahead and draw that out for you though, so you can actually visually see. If I can get a different color. So every single time you see one of these little points, there's actually a carbon sitting right there, and you can visualize the rest being filled in. And also, so right there, and then also right here, I'll go ahead and do another pen color. So every one of these, like I said, points, there is actually a carbon, and there should be 4 bonds total connected to each one of these. So and they'll be filled up by hydrogen until those 4 bonds are filled up. This is what a hydrocarbon looks like. So right here, there's 1, 2, 3, and then 4 right here. Then right here, this carbon has 1, 2, and so they'll have 2 hydrogens. Then 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So this carbon will have these 2 hydrogens, these 2 hydrogen, 2 hydrogen, 2 hydrogen, and this carbon will have 1, 2, 3 hydrogen. Okay, this is what a hydrocarbon looks like. Only carbon and hydrogen, and it's nonpolar. It's organic. It's a compound consists that mostly of carbon and hydrogen. Okay, but that's a huge difference between these two right there. So the first macromolecule we're going to be talking about today is the carbs. Okay, like I said, carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. The carbs are macromolecules that are essential for our diet. They come in all different forms: grains, fruits, vegetables, and all of them are come in different natural sources of and varieties. So carbohydrates provide energy to the body, and the simplest of all the carbohydrates is going to be glucose, C6H12O6. Okay, it's going to be one that you want to be very familiar with, because we're going to be continually referring back to glucose, and you do want to know its structural formula, C6H12O6. It is the simplest of all the different carbohydrates as well. Okay, so carbohydrates can be represented by the formula CN, H2N, and ON. That N is represented by the number of carbon in that actual formula. So if there is actually 6 carbon, okay, which is the bare minimum for carbohydrates, remember glucose is the actual simplest of all carbohydrates. So if there's 6 carbon, then you would have to do 6 times 2, which would be 12 hydrogen, and then 6 oxygen. Once again, that's the simplest of all of them, glucose. And then you could go up from there. So let's say you have 2 carbon, then you would have to do 12 carbon, then you would do 12 times 2, 24 hydrogen, and then 12 oxygen, and so forth. With that being said, you can obviously identify real quickly that that is a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio between carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Let me get a different pink color for you guys, red. Okay, so for every 1 carbon, there's 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. Okay, and that's in carbohydrates that we're referring to. Okay, so there's 3 different types of carbohydrates. The first two types of carbohydrates that we're going to be looking at right now are going to be, the first two are monosaccharide and disaccharide. These two are referred to as your simple sugars. The third one are your complex sugars, your polysaccharides. They're called complex sugars because they're very, very large and they're very, very exaggerative or much more complex versus the first two. Okay, the first two simple sugars, and they're labeled accurately because of how much more simple they are compared to the complex carbs. Very simple. Okay, this is an example of a way you can actually visually see a monosaccharide and a disaccharide being formed. Up here you see some monosaccharides. You have ribose, and this is a good one to also know because when we get into the nucleic acids, this is a good one to know because this is what actually is found in RNA. So here's ribose, which is a monosaccharide, glucose, once again the most common and simplest form of monosaccharides, and fructose. All three are monosaccharides. As you can see, they are not connected to one another. They are mono, which is one saccharide, one sugar by themselves. So one sugar, one sugar, one sugar. Disaccharide, di meaning two. So we have to combine two of these monosaccharides together to make a disaccharide. So here we have glucose right here, and we have fructose right here. They are separated still, that's why there's an addition sign right here. We have to combine them together to make a disaccharide. Okay, the way we do this is we line them up and we put an addition symbol right here. And what happens when we are actually losing water? That's called dehydration. That's what we're going to do to these guys. We're going to take away their water molecule. We're going to actually take away an OH or a hydroxide group and a hydrogen from the other one. Well, H2O is a water molecule, so we're going to dehydrate them. That's called dehydration. Okay, we're going to take dehydration, water molecule away from them, and that actually causes them to combine. That oxygen that's left over will actually sit here and actually form with this fructose over here and this glucose over here. They'll actually sit there and kind of looks like they're swinging their little kid, kind of like when you swing a kid between, let's say two adults are swinging a kid in between them. That's what it looks like right here. But that actually forms a disaccharide. Okay, so a disaccharide is just two monosaccharides put together. Okay, so you form that by dehydration. Let's say you want to do the reverse. You want to make the chemical reaction go backwards. Pretty simple. All you're going to do is add that water molecule back in. No problem. That's called hydrolysis. So here's your disaccharide. Okay, you're going to add the water molecule back in. What does that do? It helps these guys break apart. It actually adds the hydroxide group back to the fructose, adds that hydrogen ion back into the glucose. Boom, you're back to two monosaccharides. Here's the monosaccharides slide all to themselves. Once again, ribose is a monosaccharide that we're going to get into because that is actually very important part of nucleic acids, specifically RNA. Okay, so most common, you do have to know this, most common monosaccharide is glucose. The other two you're going to have to know is fructose and galactose. Okay, they are known as simple sugars. Remember the other simple sugar? There's two simple sugars. There's monosaccharide and disaccharide. Okay, monosaccharides though, they are formed from 3 to 6 carbons. If it ends in OSE, then it's usually going to be a monosaccharide. It could be linear or it can be ring-shaped molecules. Okay, depending on the number of carbons is going to be what it can also be called or known as, such as a tri, which is 3. So a triose is 3 carbon atom, pent 5 pentose, and hex is 6 hexose. Okay, now this is really interesting. I made my students in class actually count these out, so you can do this, so you can actually get a really good understanding of this. But we did this for you in class, but it is very, very good to understand and do it yourself, so that you would have a really good understanding of it. So before you read down here, try to do this on your own. Count how many carbon there are in each of these first. How many carbon are there in glucose? I'll walk you through this real quickly though, okay? But if you need to take your time and do this on your own, no problem. Pause this video and do it yourself and just write it on the side right here, okay? So carbon and glucose. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon. Okay, how many in galactose? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in galactose. Fructose. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 carbon in each of these. How many hydrogen are there in each of these? So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 right here. And then right here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and then right here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 7, 7, 7 as far as hydrogen. And then right here, sorry, I'm not counting them all. Let me go ahead and start that over. Sorry, 7. I'm completely ignoring these right here. So let's 1, 2, 3. Forgot about these on the hydroxides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sorry about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so far they're exactly the same as far as 6 carbons. Okay, there's been 12 hydrogens. Let's count how many oxygens. So I'll start so I don't get confused again on this on the left side right here. So oxygen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 oxygen. And I'll start on the left side again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they all have the same chemical formula, C6H12O6. Well, didn't we just say glucose is C6H12O6? So how can we say glucose, galactose, and fructose are all the same chemically C6H12O6? That's what an isomer is. An isomer are a bunch of different chemical compounds that are chemically the same formula. So all the 3 of these are chemically the same. They have the same chemical formula, but they are structurally different. That's what isomers are. So if you look at them, they're not the same at all. They don't look the same. So they have the same exact atoms here, but they are definitely not the same. Okay, so we have a double bond of oxygen right here on the second carbon, but the double bond of oxygen right here is on the first carbon. And right here on the 1, 2, 3rd carbon, we have this hydroxide group over here on the left, but on the 4th carbon, it's right here on the right, but it's not the same right here. So, as you can see, structurally different, chemically the same. That's what an isomer is. Okay, disaccharide. We just finished talking about how this is formed from 2 monosaccharides and how you can actually reverse that chemical reaction and reverse it back into monosaccharides. Try to quiz yourself. Try to think about it and don't look at this slide and try to remember. So if I have 2 monosaccharides and then name 2 monosaccharides, glucose is one, what's another one? Fructose. So glucose and fructose, if I try to combine those 2 together, what is that called? Dehydration. So if I remove that water molecule, I can make a disaccharide known as sucrose, common sugar. Okay. If I want to reverse that chemical reaction, I'm going to go ahead and add water back in, which is called hydrolysis. That's going to actually reverse it and make those back into monosaccharides again. Okay, so common disaccharide is sucrose, which is, like I said, the sugar. It's your common sugar that you put in in everything, Kool-Aid, coffee, things of that nature. So it's table sugar. Okay, sucrose is made out of glucose and fructose. Okay, you also have lactose and maltose. Okay, both of these are made out of monosaccharides and they're labeled right here. So maltose is actually made out of 2 glucose molecules. Pretty interesting. So here are your complex carbs. We talked about simple carbs, now here's your complex carbs. So here is your polysaccharides, okay, your complex carbs. Okay, these are covalently bonded a very, very long chain of monosaccharides, covalently bonded. They're usually used for storage and structural support and protection. For plants storage, they actually store forms of sugars in plants known as amylose and amylopectin. Okay, this is consumed by animals and broken down into much smaller molecules used for energy. Okay, glycogen is actually a huge long chain of glucose molecules that is stored in the liver and muscle cells of animals, and we definitely store in our liver and muscle cells, definitely, because that's kind of like our reservoir, our backup. So when we actually get too fatigued, that's where our actual body goes into that reservoir, so it can actually take out that glycogen molecule. Because remember, it's like a huge long chain of glucose molecules, and it's going to start breaking it down, because glucose is what we need in cellular respiration, so that we can change that glucose molecule into ATP, energy for our cells. So very, very important to store that in our liver and our muscle cells. Okay, remember we said polysaccharides or complex carbs are also good for structural support and protection. Okay, plants use polysaccharides in the form of cellulose for their actual cell walls. Okay, herbivores can eat this and digest this grass and use it as a food source. Herbivores such as cows, but unfortunately cows have about 4 different stomachs, so they can actually digest this cellulose and actually use it as a food source, whereas humans, we don't have the capabilities of digesting this and using it as a food source. So for us, when we actually ingest this, it acts more like a dietary fiber for us, because it kind of just goes straight through. Okay, and as far as chitin, insects and spiders actually use these complex carbs, one known specifically as chitin, as their exoskeleton. So when you were younger, and I know me specifically when I was younger, on the trees, I used to see all those beetles and stuff, and I used to think they were alive until I went to go grab them, and then I realized it was actually just their skeleton left behind. It was their exoskeleton. Well, the bug or the insect had actually shed their layer of exoskeleton skin, and that was made out of chitin. So it was really hard though, and it was rough, just like a real skeleton. Well, obviously that actually allowed for their support and their protection. So that was actually made out of polysaccharides. Right here is that cellulose I was talking about. Right here, that herbivores are actually able to use. Here's that starch that some animals are able to use as an energy source. But here is the one that I was telling you about, that we actually store in our liver and our muscle cells. Like I said, glycogen. What did I say glycogen was made up of again? Think about it. It's stored in our liver and our muscle cells. So, glycogen is a huge long chain of a whole bunch of monosaccharides known as glucose. All glycogen is a glucose, 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 glucose. I can go on all day. Okay, you guys get the point. Wanted to emphasize that because it's super important to understand. This is our energy reservoir. This is your body's form of saving you in those times where you overdo it. You always want to have that energy storage at times where you actually haven't eaten enough for the day and you need to go into that backup of energy. Okay, we've all gotten to those times where we didn't pack a lunch. We are overdoing it. We're feeling really good at the gym and we just keep going and going and going. Well, our body gets to the point where we extended all the energy that we just ate before we worked out, and now our body's going into backup mode. That's where glycogen and all these other reservoirs are coming into play. Okay, so we talked about our carbohydrates, which is our first macromolecule we're talking about. Remember, carbs, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. So now we're on our second, which